Well, hello and welcome to the podcast today, back for episode 2 of Thought Club. My name is Sats Solanki. Thanks for joining us. And we are just talking through a range of topics, trying to bring some nuance, trying to bring some truth, trying to bring just some fresh perspectives on so many of the cultural things that are happening around us right now. And, if you were to ask a fish, if it's in water, if it's wet, it doesn't know. And I kind of feel like for us as this generation, we're growing up in a space and in a culture that, because it's so in our face, it's so surrounding us, it can be quite hard to identify what's going on and be fully self-aware and I think aware is the word, but also reflecting, the ability to reflect on what I believe and think and assess whether that's something I actually think or if that's just something I've picked up from the culture and it's easier to kind of go along with. So today I wanted to talk about this idea of universal truth, or sometimes absolute truth. And, that's a big kind of topic for us today, because it is widely accepted in society that there are almost different sorts of truth, that, one thing can be true for one person, but might be different for another person. And that's kind of all well and good when we think about ourselves purely as individuals just operating separate lives. But we know in reality that we're not just individuals, but we're families, we're communities, we're groups, we're colleagues, we're people who are interacting. And in that intersection between people's lives, that's where that question around universal truth, is there truth that transcends experience, transcends the everyday, transcends what my experience of life is, and also applies to your life? And when you think about the idea of absolute truth, if we were to make the statement, there is no absolute truth, the funny thing about that statement is it doesn't make sense, because I'm making a statement that is absolute about truth, that it is not absolute. And so it's a bit like saying, I am my father, not in the kind of metaphorical, it's a bit like saying I'm holding a book that I can't possibly hold. It's a nonsense statement that doesn't make sense. And yet, I think in our culture, there is a general acceptance of that idea of what truth is. And why is that? I think it's most people I talk to, when you actually drill down in the conversation, do you actually believe that truth is different? People go, no, it's if you actually drill down, and that would be my question for you. What do you think? Do you think truth is absolute? Do you think it's flexible? Because there are implications to your worldview, the way that you view the world. There are huge implications if you believe that truth is differing. And we've got to wrestle with those things. We've got to have a consistent perspective. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves disintegrating as a person. When life is unpredictable, when a home is unpredictable for the kids and they don't know what's going to happen, if mum and dad are going to snap at them or get angry about this thing that's extreme. And I'm not just talking about discipline, but I'm talking about when home life is so unpredictable, it has huge psychological effects on a child without those clear boundaries, expectations, teaching of right and wrong, good and bad, whatever we establish those things to be. And lots of people have got different perspectives on that. But without those boundaries, you actually find yourself not in a place of freedom. You find that freedom actually requires boundaries, and in my view, truth is very similar to that there are confines and constraints to what truth is and what it cannot be. And when we open up those things to be whatever we want them to be, we actually find ourselves in a kind of hell on earth. And so it got me thinking, like, why is it that we often as a culture go along with things that we disagree with, that privately we would say, no, that's a load of rubbish. Privately, we think to ourselves and say, I'm not so sure about that. Privately, we might have a public face, we might have a public conversation, we might kind of self-censor what we really think, but inwardly and to close people around us, we have a sense of, I don't really buy into that. Why is that? And does it matter? Does it matter that we hold back what we really think? And I would say, to some extent, yes, it does matter. But let's just analyze that for a moment, because I think part of what it is most of us are nice people. Like, most human beings are generally quite nice, and you're probably quite a nice person tuning in now. I think I've got a reasonable amount of niceness about me. I want people to be happy around me. I don't want to upset people unnecessarily. I don't like confrontation just for the sake of confrontation. Nobody likes conflict or disagreement or arguments, or, I mean, some people do, but most of us, if you're a normal human being, you just want to keep things going. And so what we find in our culture, in our society, certain ideas come to the table, and cancel culture is a real thing. People do lose jobs for holding the wrong opinion or refusing to subscribe to a certain idea or a certain way of doing things. And for most of us, we're not kind of that sort of revolutionary sort of figure who's going to stand up to things, and we just think, well, what does it really matter? It's only a little bit of truth. It's a little bit false, but I can just accept that. I can just ignore that and just get on with my life. And, on the face of it, that seems like the easiest thing to do, because it is the easiest thing to do. But I want to suggest that every time you have a mismatch between what you really believe and what you really think and what you subscribe to in culture. I'm not talking about being, unnecessarily, in conflict with people. We don't have to shout every opinion we have. In fact, we shouldn't. But there are some times that we are asked to subscribe to an idea that we don't subscribe to, and we give away a little piece of our autonomy and our freedom and our will to something that we disagree with. And often those things compromise the idea of a universal truth, an absolute truth. Well, let's go into some examples, and this is where it might get a bit spicy, because these are cultural things that are a big deal. So, for example, let's talk about, gosh, where do we go from here? Well, let's talk about love. Let's talk about love is love. Everybody believes love is love because it's literally a sentence that completes itself. It's a sentence that doesn't actually say anything. Love is love. In other words, it doesn't matter who you love. It doesn't matter who you want to join up with in intimacy, in sexuality, and I think that's a fair position if you hold that. But here's what I do think. I think you have to carry through that thought, that idea of truth. If love really is love, and if it really doesn't matter, if there are zero boundaries and constraints about how relationships, intimate sexual relationships should work, if there really are no boundaries, then we should be okay with no boundaries. And let me give you an example. If gender doesn't matter, if multiplicity doesn't matter, how many partners someone has, if those things don't matter, and I'm not making a statement here, I'm just asking, I'm just saying, if we want to be consistent with our worldview that doesn't matter, then age doesn't matter either. Species doesn't matter. You might think, Sats, you're just being over the top, but that's the concept of universal truth. Truth that just changes to fit an individual means that for some people, age shouldn't matter. And for some people, species doesn't matter. And some people, whatever category you want to put on it, if we believe there should be no boundaries for everybody as a universal truth, then that opens up a whole heap of things that, if I'm pretty sure every single person or most people watching think, actually, I'm not sure I'm cool with that. And yet, equally, if we don't have universal truth, and if we say that truth can be flexible and it's about each person's experience and this is how they feel, I might not feel that way, but they do, and they've got permission to do that. Equally, if we make that statement, we still open up the possibility for everybody to do whatever they want, and there should be no boundaries on that person. And my problem with this is not where I sit in terms of morality of what is right and wrong, because that's a completely different conversation. My problem is the inconsistency that we apply to so many of these issues that we simply say, that's okay, that's not okay, and it erodes the human soul when we actually just go along with stuff just because we go along with it. Now, I don't think we need to be be crazy activists for morality, imposing our morality on others. But I think we should be aware in our minds that there have to be boundaries on everything, boundaries on sex, boundaries on relationship, and then begs the question, what should those boundaries be? And that is a huge question. Where do we get our truth from? For the Christian, of course, it's from the Bible, the Word of God. You know, Christians believe that the Bible is inspired by God. So that's cool. For a Muslim, they're going to, you know, pull out their truth from the Quran, the Hadith teachers, and so on and so on. You know, for an atheist or a naturalist or a Darwinist, they're going to pull out their truth from the philosophy of naturalism, of that the world has emerged from natural means. And I'm not here today in this episode to pick apart which is better, which is right. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just simply saying that, you know, you have to make sure that truth follows through. Otherwise, you don't really know what you think. And if you don't really know what you think, the problem is that life won't wait for you to figure out what you think. Life will happen to you, and in 20 years' time, you'll be faced with a crisis that is a crisis of truth that will come your way. And if you don't resolve these things now, you're going to find that the knocks of life are going to really affect you. And when we don't have a cohesive worldview, we just find ourselves can get knocked about by life. So this idea of universal truth is really important. Firstly, does it exist? Well, the alternative isn't a real alternative, because any statement about there not being universal truth makes it, or an absolute truth, makes it makes it absolute truth. And so we get this strange thing, and I'll just maybe end on this thought. We get this strange conversation around language, where we see in culture quite often language is manipulated. Love is a great example of that, because who can be against love? I mean, everybody's for love. The question is, you know, does love have boundaries? And the question is, what is love? What is love? Is love about desire? Is love about pleasure? There's a story about a rabbi who I can't remember the guy who did it, so I'm butchering this, but there's a guy who was spoke to who was eating some fish, and he said, "Why are you eating the fish?" And he says, "Because I love the fish." And he says, "No, you don't love the fish. If you loved the fish, you wouldn't have, picked it up out of the water, caught it, eaten it, all that stuff, boiled it, etc. If you love the fish, you wouldn't do that. You love yourself." And I think that's a really interesting thought, because we might use the word love in language to convey lots of things, but is love about what I can get for me, or is love about what I can give to others? And so I'll just close on this thought that language is powerful. Let's not allow false language into our vocabulary. Let's resist language and slogans coming in that are deceitful, that clash with what you really believe. You don't have to go shouting on the internet about it, and that's why I'm not doing that today. I'm not shouting about the internet about what I think. I'm just simply saying we should all assess what we truly believe, and we should look in our hearts for what we believe truth to be, and we should search and find out, is that from a Christian God? Is that from the universe? Is that from whatever other philosophy or religion we want to put in there? My challenge for you is simply that you live actually according to what you believe, and you actually align. And my personal belief is that aligns for me in a Christian perspective on life, a Christian worldview. But I appreciate that might not be where other people are as well. But my challenge to you is live in accordance to your worldview. And the thing about a worldview is when you feel like you found truth, you actually feel like you've got to convince everybody of that truth. It'd be very hard to think, hey, I've found the greatest way of thinking about my life, and I just want to keep it to myself. I mean, that doesn't seem very loving to me either. So we're going to get our thinking sorted. We're going to align the way we think, and we're going to align our behavior with that, and we've got to resist the temptation to just slot into a culture that wants us to say things, do things. Let's resist that soft kind of totalitarianism or the pressure of others around us, because the chances are a lot of other people also feel that same pressure and nobody likes it. And we want to create a space and discourse and conversation, and that's kind of what this podcast is all about as well. So thanks for tuning in for episode 2, a conversation on universal truth. Why don't you hit subscribe right now on YouTube if you're watching on podcasts, Apple, Spotify, you name it. Hit subscribe, follow me on Instagram. Love to have more conversation with you at Sats Solanki. Have an amazing day, and we'll see you soon.